All right, everybody. Oh my God, man, I got a lady on the channel that's gonna knock it out the box. Oh, man, it took me a couple weeks to get her on because she's busy. But she said, hey, I'm excited to come. She just told me this too, and I'm not making it up. She said, I'm excited to be on Strong Inspirations. You know, I'm Anthony Brogdon, and what I do is I come up with these geniuses, these people who really know what they're talking about, and I let them do the talking. Unbelievable. And I'm so excited they're interested to coming on here. Well, you know what we do. We give it to you straight, no chaser. Let me tell you something, my friends. I'm learning something too. As I interview these people, I'm sitting back here and I'm saying, wow. And now I've done a number of them. As you can see, I'm up to about 170 videos at this moment. I do 4 or 5 of them a week. And I'm sitting there and it's all kind of coming together and it's all so new. It's so much to cover. And watch it. What this lady is going to tell you, you're going to be like, did not know that. A lot of good things are happening here at Strong Inspirations. I'm having my own festival in Quindaro, Kansas, May 27th to the 29th. I'm excited. I want 1,000 of you to come. I can't take no more than 1,000, small town, so on and so forth. And we're going to have a good time. I'm going to keep telling you about it. I'm putting out the information where you can register in the next week. There's a weekend registration that gets you all your food and drinks, no alcohol. You got to bring in your own moonshine and all the food and, you know, punch and stuff like that, that go to the party that Friday night, the tours, the picnic, and to hear the speakers and all that. The simple price to make it affordable for you. You can bring the family. It's a good thing. What I want you to do, though, is hit the subscribe button on the channel. I want to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year, which is a lot. But it don't cost no money. All you do is take the cursor, hit subscribe. It don't ask no information. And to tell you the truth, what it does, it lets me know that you like what I'm doing. And if you don't like it, I'm going to keep doing it anyway. I don't care, man, lady. This is too good. But hook me up. Hit the subscribe button. Like this video, because I know she got an office with papers and all books and everything all behind her. So she's serious. And then hit the notifications bell when I put the videos up. And I put 4 or 5 of them up a week. Did you see that video with that lady who's a professor at George Washington where she says, hey, back in the day, there was a movement to go back to Africa. Did you see that one? Or how about this one? Did you see the video of the guy who wrote the book about his great-grandfather being a racist and was in the KKK and he found out, and how his family disowned him for not being a racist? Did you see that video? It's on the channel. How about this one? Did you see the video of the great-grandkids who's the grandkids of the guy, former enslaved, who he ended up, when he got his freedom, opened up a car manufacturing company? Come on now, watch this stuff. It's good. Just go through the list and hit them and watch them, and they're not that long. You can stop it when you want to, whatever. The other things I want you to do is watch my movie. I'm serious. It's streaming on Amazon, and I'm now putting it up on Tubi, so you can watch it there too soon. I'll let you know. On the rise of Black business in America. It's 75 minutes long. It is extremely powerful, not just because I did it, but I had other people tell me that. Somebody said they thought it was the finest documentary he's seen on the rise of Black business in America because it's so comprehensive, and it's streaming on Amazon. And then read my book. I'm telling you, I follow through on mine, everybody. Over 200 facts. If you know everything in this book, I give you your money back. A book with a money back guarantee. And how about this? No questions asked. You just send me a message, hey man, I knew everything in there. I figure if you that smart, maybe you need the money back and do something else with it. But get a book to somebody. Don't wait till Christmas. Get your copy now. All right. It's everything. How slaves got their freedom. Over 150 Black-owned businesses going back to slavery days. It's all in this book. And I name names. All right. And go to my website, businessintheblack.net. Just go there and get it. And it's available on Amazon also. One more thing. You hear me use this word strong a lot, right? Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is the introduction to my guest today. Oh, I'm so excited, everybody. Here she come. Introduce yourself, you strong lady, and tell us your name, and let's get it on.
Thank you, Anthony. I am just thrilled to be here and thrilled to have been invited to talk to your guests today and to have a chat with you about the Clinton Massacre. My name is Missy Jones. I teach history at Mississippi College. I'm also the director of the Paralegal Studies program here.
Okay.
But I've been passionate about the Clinton Massacre of 1875 for about the last 12 years. And
okay, let me stop you there. You said you've seen the video. You know how I do. We got to talk about you for a second now, just to let the guests know what we did the real deal. Where you from? Where you from?
I'm from South Mississippi, a little town called Loosedale, down near the coast, and I teach right now up near Jackson in Clinton, Mississippi.
Right,
so central Mississippi.
So what is your town like? Where is it?
Sure. So I live in Clinton right now. It's about 10 miles west of the capital city in Jackson, on your way toward Vicksburg.
Okay.
And I teach at a small liberal arts college, a Christian university called Mississippi College. It's the oldest in the state. We'll go back
before that though. Where you grew up? What is that town like?
Where I grew up. The town of Loosedale is down. It's about 45 minutes north of the coast and about 45 minutes west of Mobile. So down tucked in that little corner in the southeast corner of Mississippi. And I actually didn't grow up in Loosedale. That's just the closest town to where I grew up. I grew up in the boonies in a place I know no one's ever heard of called Buzzard Roost, Mississippi. There is such a place.
Now what's there? Is it it's near the water?
It is. It's near the Pascagoula River. It's about the only thing around it. So a lot of fishing. But down in along the Mississippi Basin there in the lower Mississippi Basin.
Now, growing up, what's the makeup of the racial population, Black, white, mass?
So that's a really great question, and it's how I ultimately got passionate about racial studies. Yes. But I grew up in a town that was 90% white, about 10% African American, and extremely racist in the 70s. And my own family of origin, very racist. Ooh. So that's how I grew up. Quite an interesting upbringing.
Okay, we're gonna go on this just a tad, not to get you in trouble. Sure. Knowing that, did they know you were gonna be different?
I don't know. I think it just, Anthony, I'm gonna be honest with you. I found my baby book about 10 years ago, and it had the N-word in it, like as one of the first words that I could say. So that's the type of family of origin that I had, but I wanted something different. My very best friend from kindergarten was a little African-American girl, and we were just fast friends. We're still friends, but that just never resonated with me, what my family was trying to indoctrinate me with. So from a really early age, it just did not make sense. And I wanted to do something
let me ask you this. So you're fighting back at this. Mm-hmm. How did how did they respond to you doing that? Did they shun you something or like that?
Pretty much. I don't go back home a whole lot. My father has since passed away. My mother's still living, but there was some of that.
Really?
I'm fine to stay in Mississippi, but only parts of Mississippi. There's still some pretty backward thinking places that have little pockets of the 70s in them.
Let me ask you this, and I'm not going to stay on this too long, and you got me thinking. Hopefully you don't mind. This is not live. We can do what we want with it. When they're saying that around the dinner table, are they saying it because they're mad or something happened, or just because now you've threatened me being greater than you, or what's the dynamic to say those things, especially when there was no reason to be provoked to say that?
Right. That's a really good question. My dad was from New York. My mom was from South Mississippi, and it's actually more so my dad who had these just intrinsic bigotry that he never could let go of, whether we were watching a sports game, talking about politics. And I don't know what drove that for him. I never figured that out before he passed away about 5 or 6 years ago. But he grew up in upstate New York, and then met my mom at college, and then moved to South Mississippi with her. But he would tell you up until the date of his death that that's why he moved to Mississippi. It had a racial aspect to it. He felt like he could be himself more comfortably in the 70s, raising a family in Mississippi.
Okay.
But it's an interesting dynamic there with my own family of origin.
Let me say this. There's a guy I have on the channel. When he went to school, and when they had just first integrated the schools, he said that he had to fight every day. He said, man, I didn't really like that, but it was a way of life, and I couldn't make him do anything. I had to fight. He said, but there were 2 white guys that saved his life as an adult. Was there ever an instance, did you know, that something clicked maybe for your father, that he had to change his heart at one moment, where a black guy did something for him at the store or anything like? Do you think that ever happened?
I do, because we had a few young men who happened to be Black young men that did some work for my dad and for my grandfather, and he really respected them. Once he had a relationship with people that didn't look like him, right, he tended to think of them differently. He still had his stereotypical things that he would say regarding race, but he always, if he knew someone and interacted with them and they were of a different ethnic background, he always kind of made an exception for the people that he knew. So I think he always knew the way that he felt and talked and thought was wrong, but he would never admit that, unfortunately. But I think that he still cared about people that didn't look like him on some level.
Yeah, I was wondering. And so now you go to school in that environment, not just at home, but in the neighborhood. You go to a segregated school. You live on the other side of the tracks, the whole 9 yards. How did you have this young lady as your friend?
Well, I grew up, if I had gone to the school I was supposed to go to, it would have been 100% white. But my mom taught at a different school in Loosedale, which had that 10% African-American population living in that jurisdiction.
I see.
So it was segregated by community and where people lived in that sense. But by going with her to the more, city school in town that had a different ethnic makeup, I then had friends who didn't look like me, and I love that. I cherish that. I would not have wanted to attend the
got
other
you.
school.
I got one more
Right.
question on this, and we go on that
Sure.
same line. But I had one guy who came on. He said they played together, but then there was a moment where we couldn't do that no more. Because at some point in time, my buddies is going to look at me, call me names. I had to make a call, and it hurt him. Did that happen to you?
It did. Really early on, my friend Sheila and I, we couldn't go play at each other's house, right? Not that she couldn't come play at my house. It's just that my parents wouldn't let her.
Yeah,
And then
right.
my parents wouldn't let me go play at her house. And I'm 5, 6 years old, right? So it just never made sense to me why that was the way that it was.
Sure.
And we stayed friends throughout high school, all the way. But I think at that really young age of, just because my friend didn't look like me, why couldn't she come? Why couldn't we have the same friendship we had at school, outside of school?
Yeah.
And I think that laid the groundwork for me.
Okay, how about this? How did the other students take this, though? You and her friendship, though, some of your friends probably looked at you a little funny, maybe.
They did. I guess early on, I didn't much think about it a whole lot. My friends were just my friends.
Yeah.
But I don't remember really giving it a whole lot of thought throughout grade school.
Yeah.
It just, my friends were my friends, and it just didn't matter.
And so this leads into a part of the discussion. Can you understand why somebody would kill somebody who's just standing there?
I can't.
Because I'm that angry?
No, I can't understand that at all.
When they did it, did they always have to get drunk? You know what I'm saying? Because I think a lot of times they did it after drinking. That got your nerve up, maybe.
I would think that's the case. And that certainly happens in the Clinton Massacre that we're going to talk about today. It absolutely did. It absolutely does. And it's the white assassins, the white Democrats in the 1870s during Reconstruction. They were the ones drinking, and when they get called out and are asked to sort of settle down at a political rally, that's when the shooting starts. But when the violence is over, we'll see those same white Democrats blame the Black population for drinking at an event.
So that, okay, so let's go into it. Let's go to the beginning of the Clinton Massacre. Where, when, that kind of thing.
So this would have been 1875. It's 10 years into Reconstruction at this point. And we're beginning to see, by 1875, the Republican Party nationally begin to sort of back away from Reconstruction. It becomes more of a political liability. And there was about to be a presidential election the next year in 1876. And the Republican Party was really concerned that they would lose the presidency that election year. And we see a lot of white Democrats in the South, in places like Mississippi, who were then at a numerical minority because of the former slave population here in parts of Mississippi. Hinds County, where Clinton and the capital city of Jackson is, are within those pockets where whites are in the minority politically and in voting. And they begin to kind of come up with a way that they can take advantage of the Republican Party sort of backing away from Reconstruction, and where they can insert themselves to begin intimidating Black voters, male Black voters at the time who could vote, from showing up at the polls. That was the only way that whites in Mississippi could take back political control of the state, something they'd call redemption, right?
Okay, let me stop you there. Let's go back a little bit more for those who don't know.
Mhm.
the scenario of, or the attitude of the two parties.
Mhm.
The Republican Party, I don't mean to get political on it, is not the Republican Party of the day. It is the party.
Yes.
It might be a switch of the roles. Is that correct? Tell us that
That is
scenario, and then that'll help us
Sure.
understand.
Really good question. And I get this question all the time. So the Republican Party in 1875 was only 20 years old. It had just formed prior to the Civil War. So it's a really young party. But at this point in time, especially toward the end of the Civil War and into Reconstruction, it's the party of Lincoln. It's the party of emancipation. It's the party that, right, whereby slaves gain their formerly enslaved individuals gain their freedom through Lincoln as the great emancipator. So you're going to see mostly African Americans in the South being loyal to that Republican Party, some white. But the Democratic Party is the white party.
Okay, let me stop you there. Now, when we had those politicians in the Reconstruction period, and for some reason names elude me, but you know the names who got voted. They ran as Republicans, the Hiram Revels and whatnot, right?
Yes, they did. They ran as Republicans. Absolutely.
Okay. So then what happens is now they are for the Republican Party, and then go back to the beginning of their story of what happened in, as you said it. Okay.
Absolutely. So as white Democrats begin to see sort of federal policies back away from Reconstruction, and maybe the what was the former Union, the United States, sort of saying, well, maybe we're not going to continue to send in federal troops into the South to monitor aspects of race. That's when you begin to see these white Democrats who were former Confederates or the children of Confederate veterans begin to use the Democratic Party and paramilitary groups associated with the Democratic Party to begin to terrorize Black voters to keep them away from the polls or to keep them out of local Republican Party politics and running for local offices, because numerically they're in the minority. The only way they can do that is to keep Black men from voting.
Okay. So then what happens though? What happens?
Sure. Right. So that fall of 1875, it was heading into a statewide election. It was going to decide some critical seats in the state legislature and also within local races for sheriff and other positions of authority in different counties.
Okay.
So they hoped with this election to make this change at the polls and to begin to intimidate Black voters. And they decide to, and this is premeditated. They meet, especially for the county where Clinton and Jackson is in Hinds County, they meet and decide going into that election season, as Republican rallies are being held and Black men are hearing about people running for office and people stumping and campaigning for those offices, the white Democratic Party decides we're going to send in these armed white men to disrupt those meetings and to just heckle the speaker and tell them to stop telling lies. And this is what they do. And in Clinton, there was a huge political rally.
Okay, stop. Don't forget that thought. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Who's speaking at the rallies? Are there white people, or are there some Black people that also are speaking at these rallies?
Both. And at this Republican rally, they even invited white Democratic speakers to come and speak. If this was all about the local Republican Party educating Black men on who's running for office, how to vote, how to register. It's all about voter education. Even if
let me stop you there. So the majority of the audience at the rally were Black people.
They were about
Okay, I got you.
2,000 of them, about 2,000 to 2,500
Oh, really?
African Americans. This was the largest gathering, probably, of freed people since the war ended. This was a huge gathering.
And it was where? Where was it held? What kind of outside or something?
It was outside, and they picked the spot was interesting because they picked the site of a former plantation house that the home had been destroyed by Union troops in 1863. So this is on the site of a former plantation where you have over 2,000 free people gathering to learn about voting and candidates, but it's on the site of a spot where they would have been worked and enslaved. So it's kind of a contested space, a contested public space.
Okay. So then go back now. So all of them show up, they're sitting in there listening to these speakers.
They are, and they let the Democratic speaker go first, the white Democratic speaker go first. And then when a white Republican takes the stand next, there's a group of about a dozen or so, maybe 24 people called white liners. These are the paramilitary units of the Democratic Party who were sent there to disrupt and heckle the Republican speakers. And these men are drunk. They have sidearms on their hips, and no one was supposed to go there with alcohol or with firearms. And by and large, the African-American population respected that, but these white liners did not.
Okay.
And when they start heckling the speaker, a local law enforcement officer comes over to them, who's Black, comes over to these men and asks them to kind of keep the peace, to settle down, but to try to keep things from going awry. And one of them pulls a gun out of his pocket and shoots him point blank in the forehead, killing him instantly. And that's how the violence erupts.
So what happened then after that? What do you say the violence? What's the story of the violence?
So very quickly, all of these white men, these white liners, pull guns and start firing indiscriminately into the Black population in the crowd. And this is families, mothers with babies. It was supposed to be a picnic. So these are whole families who are gathered in this space. And they begin fleeing, grabbing children, running helter-skelter in every direction. And by nightfall, there were 2 or 3 African Americans who were killed, including that police officer, and then another child, probably an early teenager.
But why is that? That's all that's killed. I mean, bad shots or something like that?
Yeah, they flee and they're drunk still, and there's not a whole lot of them, of these white liners there in comparison to the crowd. And there are 2 whites that are killed. So it's 2 or 3 African Americans, 2 or 3 white people that are killed. But then by nightfall, about 300 of those white liners come in to the county from nearby railroad stations. They were all staged and ready to go as soon as the violence started. So again, this is premeditated. So they start, brought by the trainload, bringing these hundreds of white liners into Clinton, and they spread a rumor that the rally wasn't a rally, that this was African Americans trying to take over the town, Black men trying to rape white women, which was not the case at all.
There's always a woman involved in these things. they pick a woman out the bunch.
Yeah, and they start spreading these rumors that this is Black retaliation for slavery, which hadn't happened for 10 years since the end of the Civil War, but they use all of this rhetoric as a pretense to then go out and lynch leaders of the local Republican Party. About 30 more Black political leaders are systematically lynched, and many of them in front of their children at their homes. It's pretty horrible to read some
So
of
they
these
know
accounts.
who's who.
They do. And they even print this in the newspaper leading up to this rally. Their newspaper accounts where they name all of the Black Republican leaders, and they say, these are marked men. The violence is just there, and basically telling who they are and where they live, and telling the white population to go and lynch them prior to this election. But that's part of this premeditated, what ends up being the Mississippi plan to take back by shotgun political control.
So how does the night end or the days end after that?
So that by that nightfall, you have roughly 2 or 3 people of color who are killed, and 2 whites that are
Who
killed.
are the whites? Are they the whites that were
They're
there?
the white liners. Yes, they were. They were the ones heckling, and so 2 of them are killed in retaliation for killing that police officer. They were the ones who pulled the weapons and killed the police officer.
How do you think they were killed? By hand, or did somebody had a gun, or do they know?
I think it was knife. From reading those accounts, I think it was, they were killed via a knife.
Yeah, so somebody grabbed them and
yes,
got to them. Okay.
Yes. So and here's another thing that's important, right? While this was not instigated by Republicans, Black Republicans were willing to defend themselves and defend their families and defend their communities. And when this local police officer is killed, they they respond by self-defense.
Yeah, sure.
And they take care of
sure.
them. So it's not, they didn't go there with the idea of having to retaliate or protect themselves, but they're willing to because their families are at risk.
Sure.
Right.
So then what happens the next couple of days?
Mm-hmm. It's just pandemonium. And there are accounts where one Black Republican leader named Eugene Wellborn said that the white liners just clean the whole country clean out, shooting at Black men the same as birds. That's his quote, the same as birds. And that cleaning the whole country clean out, that's his quote. So it's pretty horrible over the next 2 or 3 days, but these white liners come in and they go to the homes of Black Republicans. All of them are African-American except for one white Republican who is killed in front of his family too. Whoa. So there is one white Republican death.
And so what then after they do all this, they leave, and then what happens in the town? Right.
So in Clinton, a lot of Black men who managed to escape the violence are still in hiding. And the governor at the time, who's a Republican governor, Governor Ames, he reaches out to President Grant and says, we got to have federal troops. I can't protect my Black citizens. This violence is just helter-skelter. And he asked President Grant to send in federal troops into Mississippi. And this is where Grant, and it's right after the Clinton Massacre, where Grant issues this famous statement of the North is tired of these autumnal outbreaks in the South. And he says the South is on its own. We're not sending in any more federal troops.
Oh, really? So he doesn't even help?
No, and that marks this moment that he had intervened at all other times previous to this. But this is the point where this let alone policy for all of the South, not just Mississippi, is ushered into effect after the Clinton Massacre.
Is Grant Republican or a Democrat himself?
Republican.
I'm talking about the president.
Yes, Republican.
He's Republican.
Yes.
So when he says that, then what happens? Now these Black people are on their own.
They are on their own. And even the governor is still asking for local militia units to respond to his call to put down the violence. The only people who are willing to respond are Black men. White men are not willing to help because they're largely the ones instigating the violence. And there are, I think, 3 to 5 companies of African-American men that the governor then sort of marshals in as militia units to protect other Black residents.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, and one of these men was a state senator by the name of Charles Caldwell. He leads one of those companies of militia units to go and fetch weapons so that he can arm the militia. But they really don't do anything further after that because the governor enters into a peace agreement with the white Democrats, hoping to end the violence. But when he enters into this peace agreement, it basically just allows whites to have control and white Democrats to have control in the state. Those Black militia units are disbanded and not used any longer, but the violence doesn't stop. It unfortunately continues.
Okay, so a couple more questions, I guess, in this. When you say the violence continues, okay, I live there. What's my everyday life like? I'm on alert as a Black person. I'm on alert, worried that, okay, all of a sudden something could happen or I have to hide. What's that life like?
Exactly. Every day, literally that worry, that terror that your family could be attacked, that you can't then make use of your citizenship. You're afraid to vote. You're afraid to identify yourself as a Republican, especially a Black Republican, because that then makes you a target. And no one is coming to your rescue. No one, not the state government, not the federal government.
Yeah, sure.
There's no one coming to your rescue after this. And to protect their families, a lot of these men end up choosing not to go to the polls and vote, because if they do, they could be lynched right there on the spot.
Oh my God. Okay, so now, so let's say the Clinton Massacre had happened when, and voting is the first Tuesday of November as it is now?
That's it. So it happened September 4th, 1875. And again, just 2 months before that election that was supposed to be at the 1st of November. I think that year it was November 2nd of 1875. And 2 years prior, at the statewide elections, there had been a 30,000 vote majority for Black Republicans. This time, 2 years later, there's now a 30,000 vote plus for white Democrats. So it's a 50 to 60,000 vote swing in 2 years. And it's not that Black men don't want to vote or there are fewer of them in the state. It's that terror and intimidation that has been ushered in 1875 that prevents them from going to the polls to vote.
Okay, how about this one? Okay, if I'm a Republican and I'm running for office, don't I do something to try to help Blacks because I know they're going to vote for me, or I just know it's a lost cause? And so that's one question. Let's get there, that one, and then I got another one. Sure.
So it's really dangerous for Black Republican leaders and office holders at this point. Just 9 months prior to the Clinton Massacre, there was a Black sheriff in Warren County, which is the county just to our immediate west where Vicksburg is. And they had a Black sheriff because there was a large Black population there. 9 months prior to the Clinton Massacre, he gets run out of office and threatened by white Democrats to give up his duly elected position. And he went to Ames and tried to get a militia unit to reinstall him into his office. And he brings back several companies of Black men to help put him back in office, but that erupts in a massacre too. And there are over 300, some accounts say as many as 300 Black men that are lynched and assassinated in that ruckus.
And
So
that,
it's
is there a title
dangerous.
for that one?
The Vicksburg Massacre. It happens in 1874, and Grant intervenes there 9 months prior, but in Clinton 9 months later, he says no more. We're not going to do it again.
How many? So what was the outcome of the election that happened as a result of the Clinton massacre? It's a sweep against the Republicans?
Pretty much. And even though the governor and the lieutenant governor of Mississippi weren't up for re-election that year, they are made to resign. We had Ames as a white Republican, and we had a Black Republican lieutenant governor in 1875. And the white Democrats make the lieutenant governor resign first. Then minutes later, they make Ames resign, just so for a short period of time, there wouldn't be by default a Black governor of Mississippi. So they are intentional about making the lieutenant governor resign first, and then Ames resign. And white Democrats have redeemed, taken back political control of Mississippi, and Reconstruction essentially ends for Mississippi in the fall of 1875.
Oh man. Are there in present day historical markers where the massacre happened at the plantation? What does it look like? What's there now?
That's a great question. We dedicated a marker in 2015. That was the 140th anniversary of the Clinton Massacre. And we had a state historical marker, the first in Mississippi that acknowledged white on Black violence during Reconstruction. It's the only marker in Mississippi that acknowledged that in 2015 and that still acknowledges that. Unfortunately, that marker's been knocked down twice since it was put up. In a 2-year span, it was accidentally knocked down twice. And so it's not there. It's on, we've got a third one ordered right now. So it's not standing.
Yeah. What's at that plantation though? Is that a tourist site? Does people come down there to see it as a tourist site? The National Park Service took it over or something like that?
No, it's not, but probably something even better happened in Clinton. That property ends up being parceled out and sold to local Black residents during the Reconstruction era. A white school teacher by the name of Sarah Dickey from Ohio moved to Clinton at the end of the Civil War and started a school for educating Black women to become teachers themselves. And she bought that property and then parceled it out at really cheap prices to local Clinton residents. So right now it's called the Sarah Dickey neighborhood.
Okay.
And it's almost wholly owned by local Clinton Black families and has been owned by Black families for about 130, 140 years.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And that's what it is today.
Okay.
It's called the Sarah Dickey neighborhood.
Is there I guess as we kind of come to a close on the Clinton massacre, so how many people were actually killed? Did they estimate over those 4 or 5 days or something? Right,
between 30 and 50, and just about all except for 3 or 4 are African American, and they're African American men. So they were targeting Black men and leaders of the Republican Party.
I keep getting these good questions. Maybe. Is there any fight back from the Blacks down there? I know the guy did, the sheriff, but even during his time, do they take up arms and start shooting back?
They take up arms to act as militia to keep the peace. And that individual I mentioned, the state senator, Charles Caldwell, that's what he attempts to do by forming these Black militia units in response to the governor's call. But he becomes the last victim of the Clinton massacre. After the election in November, he escapes the Clinton massacre. He escapes the fracas of that rally. he leads some of these militia units to try to restore peace. And on the last day in December, it's between Christmas Day and the first of the year, he is intentionally assassinated by white Democrats in Clinton. He's lured into the basement of a building here in Clinton that still stands. And he was invited to come and toast glasses with a local business owner. And when he toasts glasses with him, when they clink their glasses to celebrate the Christmas season, there were white liners poised at the window to the basement, and that was their sign to shoot and assassinate him. And he is assassinated. His name was Charles Caldwell, Senator Charles Caldwell. He becomes that last victim of the Clinton Massacre.
Wow. And what made you choose this topic? I mean, because you live there, or?
I do live there. One of my church members actually pointed out a missing state historical marker that was put up in the 40s. That it wasn't dedicated to the riot, but it mentioned the riot. And this marker went missing sometime in the 80s. And there was a big mystery around why it was missing and why it was never put back up. And that first got me interested in the topic. And the more that I started kind of rooting around and asking questions, the more pushback I got locally. And so that just further entrenched me in finding out what had happened and why it's not talked about locally, why people were so resistant to put up markers, to talk about it. So that's been my work.
Yeah, I two more questions. When you do your research on that, you're asking somebody the answers to these questions that you have, that to give you this information.
That's right.
Somebody tells you, leave me alone, that you ask. So you might have even asked somebody who they are a descendant of someone who committed these atrocities.
Yes, on both sides. Descendants of Victims, I talked to quite a bit and have interviewed, and I have talked to a few white residents who might be descendants of those who committed or involved.
And they shared something with you?
Usually they won't. They're really reluctant to talk about it. And I have more of my contacts and oral histories from among descendants in the Sarah Dickey neighborhood. And it's those stories that I really want to tell. But I do think there are descendants here that are reluctant to talk. And the mayor and I have not gotten along very well as a result of all this. But that's just a part of doing public history in this kind of work.
My last question, do you put your life on the line trying to get this information to some extent? I mean, you know how they make the movies, whistleblowers and stuff, and you looking out the window at night. Did that ever happen to you?
I have not worried about that.
Really?
I haven't. And I didn't worry for my own safety. I guess I just didn't think that would happen. And probably that is a result of my own privilege because of my race, I think. Had I been of a different race, I think I may have needed, so I acknowledge that.
Right.
But I have gotten a lot of pushback and a lot of people who aren't willing to talk to me about it. But I would say probably more lost relationships than anything else.
Yeah. That's deep.
But I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
And so are you still doing research on this? Or so you still talking about it? You lecturing on this and everything else? Got to come to close. Is there a question I have not asked you, something that goes with this? Along with that, tell us about your book and what your efforts are that to get the word out.
I'm currently writing my dissertation and finishing that up, and it's on this topic. I hope to be done in the next few years, really soon. And I hope to have maybe to get it published around the 150th anniversary, which is in 2025. That's kind of what I'm hoping to be able to do so that we can really tell the whole story of how this fits into the national narrative and what happened here in Clinton. My biggest goal is to tell the stories of Black voices whose story has kind of been overlooked or not recorded.
Sure.
So that's really my big effort, is to tell their stories.
So you don't have a book out now at present, though?
Not at present.
Not
I've
at
got
present.
some
Okay.
articles online.
Yeah.
One for the Mississippi Historical Society and one in the Mississippi Encyclopedia about it. That's online.
Okay.
But hopefully the dissertation will turn into something that will be published as a
sooner
book.
than 2025. Let's get this word out.
I hope so.
Lastly, is there any type of festival, or has it become a national park service or something where, is it a tourist attraction? Do people come down there to see this?
I want them to. That's my goal, and the way that I want the city to embrace this, because this is by far the most important event that ever happened here. So there are some current efforts to try to get the marker moved and put in a more safe spot where it can be interpreted, and it can be sort of a tourist destination, but it's not right now. Another marker just went up as a part of the Mississippi Freedom Trail, called the Clinton Massacre, and that marker literally just went up 2 weeks ago. So that marker is up. It's not quite a tourist attraction yet or part of the National Park Service, but I think there are ways to incorporate this within the National Park Service. And that's what we're trying to work on, some of that right now.
I got you.
Yeah.
Well, hey, everybody, this is man. Oh my God. I had heard of the Clinton Massacre, but you put it out there on Strong Inspirations. Everybody, I'm telling you, I find these passionate people who, let's say this has become their calling. I mean, you teach to make a living and whatnot, but outside of that, I'm sure you still spend some days every week on something relative to this. This has become her calling, everybody. This is no question about it. Everybody, Strong Inspirations is what we do. We found these stories and these beautiful people and let them tell it. I try to come up with a few questions. Hit the subscribe button, come on. Hit the like button. If you don't like no other video on my channel, let me tell you, my friends, you should like this one. If you like no other video, if you have not been moved with this video, I'm gonna keep moving you somehow till I get you there. But she moved me. She put it there, and I could see it was personal about her too. I could feel it. My eyes kind of tearing up. I ain't gonna lie to you. Thank you for coming on the channel, everybody. You heard what I said. Hit that like button, hit the notifications bell. Tell somebody about Strong Inspirations, where we give it to you, like I said, straight, no chaser. You want to put a lemon in, or put a lemon in, or put a lime in it, or whatever. Not to intoxicate you, but to enlighten you. To you, my guests, I say this with all sincerity. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing. Putting your life on the line. I don't mean that I ain't throwing nothing out there to do this, to get this word out. It's a beautiful thing that since the day that you decided you want to be different, you have followed through since then and are now continuing to do that. How about this? Amen. Amen, everybody. With that, I'll say bye-bye. We out. Stay strong.